Okay, guys, we're actually going to go through the second half. This is the second half of Act 2, Scene 4. So make sure you're on page 328. So make sure you're on page 328. And just reminders as you're watching this video to make sure you're making all the notes just like we do in class in your own notes. And in this on-course assessment, you'll have questions after follow-up. Did you kind of pay attention? Did you understand? Okay, so at this point in the story, we know Mercutio was being disrespectful and really just mistreating the lower class nurse. And so as we're going in the second half, we see the nurse. She's very, very angry. So make sure you make that note. She's very kind of angry. Mercutio has just kind of offended her completely, called her old and various other things. And so they've gone away. And so nurse is actually with Romeo by himself. But before they can actually talk about anything, she's very kind of flustered. She says, and to speak anything against me, I'll take him down. So she's literally threatening Mercutio, and she's very frustrated. And a lesser than he is, and 26 jacks, and if I cannot, I'll find those that shall. And so she really wants revenge. And she's just very, very upset. Scurvy Abe, I'm not one of his flirt girls. I'm not one of his skeins mates. So basically, not one of his bros. Think about we've seen some of the teenage characters kind of mess with each other and kind of joke. And she's like, I'm not one of those people. And so she's very offended. Then she turns to her servant, and thou must stand by too and suffer every knave to use me at his pleasure. And so she's questioning him, like, wait, you sat there and did nothing. And he responds, I saw no man use you at his pleasure. If I had my weapon should quickly have been out, I warrant you. And so we see a little sense of sarcasm. He actually doesn't really mean that, but he's trying to say this so that way he looks like he's actually supportive. And he's like, "Oh, I never saw anybody disrespect you. I dare draw as soon as another man if I see occasion in a good quarrel and the law on my side." So he's like, "Oh, I would definitely fight." And so we see he's being very sarcastic. Now we see the nurse. She eventually does kind of calm down, but she's now before God. I'm so vexed. So she's very kind of annoyed and flustered. In every part about me quivers, scurvy knave. Pray you, sir, a word. And as I told you, my young lady bade me inquire you out. So I would circle young lady. She's talking about Juliet here. And so remember what Juliet is supposed to send, a messenger. And so she's saying she's that person. What she bid me say, I will keep to myself. But first, let me tell you, if you should lead her into a fool's paradise, as they say, if I were a very gross kind of behavior, as they say. If you notice, as they say is repeated over and over again. We've already kind of established that the servants are not very educated, so they're definitely kind of repetitive over and over again. But if you notice, lead her into a fool's paradise. One thing the nurse is trying to basically make sure that he's not basically lying, okay, or kind of falsely leading her into something that is really not there. And it's a very gross kind of behavior. For the gentlewoman is young, and therefore, if you should deal double. So we start seeing her being very protective, and she kind of warns him, like, you better not be kind of messing with my Juliet. Truly, it were an ill thing to be offered to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing. And then Romeo, nurse, commend me to the lady and mistress. I protest unto thee, good heart, and I faith I will tell her as much. So he's saying, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm giving my respectful greetings. His little footnote on the side. So he's saying, like, I am serious. Okay, he's trying to backtrack from what he was treating her earlier, and now he's like, no, I really do mean business. Good heart, and I faith I will tell her as much. Lord, she'll be a joyful woman. What will thou tell her, nurse? Thou dost not mark me. I will tell her, sir, that you do protest, which I take it is a gentlemanlike offer. So, nurse is saying, okay, she's kind of calmed her nerves. She's, she sees that he actually is kind of, being gentleman, that he's serious, that he's, not kind of trying to falsify things. And then Romeo says, bid her devise some means to come to shrift this afternoon. So think about, these are the directions he wants Juliet to take. And remember, their whole point is to kind of have some kind of plan. That's what Nurse is there to do, to get the plan and bring it back to Juliet. So Romeo tells her, some means to come to Shrift this afternoon. And we've talked before in this play, Shrift is appearing a lot, the idea of a confession. Okay, so telling the nurse to tell Juliet, find a way to come to confession this afternoon, and there she shall at Friar Lawrence's cell be shrived, so definitely go to confession, but also married. And so think about in Act 2, a lot of this is access. How are they going to break barriers down? Well, by telling her family, hey, I'm going to confession, and then this part about married probably is going to be omitted. Think about a vocab word, the idea to omit. And so that's one way they can actually see each other. And then the nurse is offered money. He's like, here's for that pain. She's like, oh no, I don't want that. I don't want that. And as we're turning to 329, go to, I say you shall. This afternoon, sir. Well, she shall be there. And stay, good nurse, behind the abbey wall. Now, an abbey is basically a type of church. Okay. So he's directing the nurse to go behind the abbey wall. Within this hour, my man shall be with thee. And my man basically is his servant. And bring these cords made like a tackled stair. And so cords as a stair, that's a rope ladder. So he's telling the nurse that in an hour, my servant is going to give you specifically a rope ladder, which to the high tap gallant of my joy must be my convoy in the secret night. Farewell, be trusty, and I'll quit thy pains. Farewell, commend me to thy mistress. Now, God in heaven bless thee. Hark you, sir. And so they start saying goodbye. So the idea the conversation should be ending, but we know, think about the nurse and communication. She's going to actually stop them and try to, hey, I have more questions. So let's kind of watch that portion.
On my side.
Now, afore God, I'm so vexed every part about me quivers. Oh. Pray you, sir, a word. And as I told you, my young lady bid me inquire you out. What she bid me say, I will keep to myself. Well, first let me tell you, if ye should lead her in a fool's paradise, as they say, it were a very gross kind of behaviour, as they say. For the gentlewoman is young, and therefore if you should deal double with her, truly were an ill thing to be offered to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing.
Nurse, commend me to thy lady and mistress. I protest unto thee.
God heart me, faith, I will tell her as much. Lord, she will be a joyful woman.
What wilt thou tell her, nurse? Thou dost not mark me.
I will tell her, sir, that you do protest. Or as I take it, is a gentlemanlike offer.
Bid her devise some means to come to Shrift this afternoon. There she shall at Friar Lawrence's cell be shrived and married.
Oh!
Here is for thy pains.
No, truly, sir, not a penny.
Go to, I say you shall.
Oh, this afternoon, sir. Well, she shall be there.
And stay, good nurse, behind the abbey wall. Within this hour my man shall be with thee, and bring thee cords made like a tackled stair, which to the high top gallant of my joy shall be my convoy in the secret night. Farewell, be trusty, and I'll quit thy pains. Farewell, commend me to thy mistress.
No, God in heaven bless thee. Hark you, sir.
Okay, so we see hark you, sir. He basically calls him back. Okay, so after she's gotten some information, she calls him back. And so Romeo says, what sayest thou, my dear nurse? Like, what do you want? Is your man's secret. Now, when he talks about his man, think about that little servant guy in the back, kind of lurks. Can you trust him? Did you never say to may keep counsel, putting one away? So, can you trust your servant? And Romeo says, I warrant thee, my man's as true as steel. So he responds, yes, I can. Like, he's very trustworthy. Well, sir, my mistress is the sweetest lady, Lord, when 'twas a little prating thing. Oh, there's a nobleman in town, one Paris. So if you notice this little dash, remember the idea of communication. The nurse is not very smart. Most of the servants are not very educated, so she kind of jumps to like a new idea, and she's, oh wait, there's this guy Paris that would fain lay knife aboard, but she could so had as lief see a toad, a very toad as see him. And so he reveals to her that about Paris wanting to basically, Paris wanting marriage with Juliet. But she could so had leave see a toad, and so we start seeing that basically this is Juliet's opinion of Paris. And so Nurse is telling all of this to Romeo and saying, oh, she really doesn't like him. I anger her sometimes and tell her that Paris is the proper man. So we get a little bit of perspective of the nurse. And so she actually is literally telling Romeo, yeah, I thought actually he's probably the better option. But I warrant you when I say so, she looks as pale as any cloud in the versatile world. So think about the idea of reaction. We will start kind of hearing about how Juliet is kind of thinking of all this, and they each get reported to what the other person is feeling. And then Nurse asked us, Rosemary and Romeo both begin with a letter. Now we've talked about kind of reading and letters, and so remember the idea of being illiterate. And so that's what she's asking. Wait, is Rosemary and Romeo begin with the same letter? Aye, Nurse, what of that? Both of them are like, oh yeah, they are. Mocker, that's the dog's name. Or is for the, no, I know it began with some other letter, and she had the pretty sententious of it. So, I mean, think about Romeo is just complicit in mistreating her. So she has some kind of doubt, like, oh, are you trying to make fun of me? Like, oh, that can't be right. But then she eventually does say she had the pretty sententious of you and Rosemary. That would be do you good to hear it. So think about the idea of think about sentences and writing. And so we start seeing actions that Juliet actually does really love Romeo, which remember Rosaline never did. So we actually start seeing signs from other people that she actually does, she's committed and following through. Romeo, commend me to thy lady 1,000 times. Remember, everything's extreme. Peter, anon. She calls her servant. Take my fan and go before at a pace. And so then they all leave. And so she, remember, the idea is reporting. She's going to report back to Juliet, which actually will be the next scene that we're going to cover. And so that ends that scene. So let's watch that little portion.
What says thou, my dear nurse?
It's your man's secret. Huh? I mean, did you ne'er hear say to make it counsel, putting one away?
Warrant thee, my man's as true as steel.
Well, sir, my mistress is the sweetest lady. Lord, not when 'twas a little prating thing. Oh, there's a nobleman in town, one Paris, would fain lay knife aboard. But she good soul as at least see a toad, as very toad to see him. Yeah, I anger her sometimes and tell her that Paris is the proper man. But I'll warrant you when I say so, she looks as pale as any clout in the versal world. It doth not Rosemary and Romeo begin both with a letter?
Aye, nurse, what of that, both with an R?
Yeah, Mocker. That's the dog's name. R is for the... No, I know it begins with some other letter. She has the prettiest sententious of it, of you and Rosemary. It would do you good to hear it.
Commend me to thy lady.
Aye, 1,000 times. Peter, along. And a pace.
Okay, and so that concludes scene 4, which then will build into scene 5 when the nurse actually will go back to Juliet and eventually tell her. So make sure you've completed all the notes, you have all of this in your play, and then answer the questions in the assessment.